Alright, now that we've worked on graphing radicals, we're going to start practicing solving radicals. So the first thing we'll do is review solving by graphing. We've done this before when we work with quadratics. So let's take a look at how it looks. Remember, a general and basic radical equation looks like this. It has a root symbol in it, and then you have your variables and numbers that you're adding or subtracting or multiplying. So let's just review solving graphically. If I wanted to solve graphically, you're going to have to use your calculator. Remember, when we did this, one side of the equation was y1, and the other side of the equation was y2. So on your calculator, when you type them in, you go to y equals. Let's clear out whatever's in there. So we've got the square root of, and notice all those values are underneath the radical. So that's why you've got to make sure you keep them in the right spot. The second part is y sub 2, and that is going to be your negative 4x plus 6. So graph it. And we should see the graph that I've already given you, which is the case. So remember, when we look for the solution is where they intersect. So it's easier to determine the solution on your calculator because your calculator can automatically calculate it. So the steps to finding the solution would be second, trace, intersect. Once you get to this screen, you press enter 3 times, and it tells you what the intersection is. We're mostly just concerned about the x value for the solution, because that's where the value of x that satisfies both equations. So in this case, x equals 0.947. So let's try the next equation. Y equals, clear out what's there, negative x plus 8, and the square root of 5 minus x. Notice again that everything is underneath the radical. Graph it, make sure we see the same graph as before. Okay, so that's good. Notice in this graph, these two lines are not intersecting, so there is no intersection point. When that happens, we have what's called no solution. So the answer to this problem is no solution because there is no intersection. Let's try the last one. For this one, there's a special symbol. This is the cube root symbol. So this is a number multiplied by itself 3 times for the cube. To get that, you hit the math key, which is right underneath alpha, and you go down to number 4, and then you can type in your equations. Notice the minus 5 is on the outside of the radical symbol. Graph. We're looking for where these two equations are intersecting. So they're graphing the first equation, and there's the second equation. The intersections, there's 2 of them, so we have to do second trace intersect twice. Move your cursor closer to the intersections so you can see exactly where each one is. So the first one's at x equals negative 1.937, or you got to do it again. Move it closer to the right-hand side of the graph 3 times. X equals 2.522. That's solving graphically. So practice 4, 5, and 6 on your own and see if you can get the solutions. So I would pause the video and then you can see if you got the answers. I'll show you the work. I'll continue while you try as well. So I'm just going to do the graphing here. Alright, so check your answers there. And now let's try working on, sorry about that little error there, scratch that out, that line was on the x-axis. Let's try solving algebraically now. So solving algebraically, you could go back to your calculator and just do this solving graphically, you'd get the answer, but you can also work on it solving algebraically. So like any other equation, when you're solving you want to undo your steps. So here, the opposite or the inverse of the square root is squaring. So to get rid of the square root, you just square root both sides, or you raise it to the power of 2 on both sides. So now the square and the square root cancels. You get x equals 64. And you can check, if you plug 64 back in, the square root of 64 is 8. So you actually should make sure, because sometimes those answers won't work. Same thing for this problem. Square both sides. Notice I used parentheses because negative 3 squared gives me positive 9, because it's negative 3 times negative 3. Here the square and the square root cancel. So now I just have to solve and get 15 equals x. But now let's check that. If you plug in 15 for x, you get negative 3 equals the square root of 9. But if you square root 9, you don't get a negative value. So this is no solution for this problem, because 15 does not actually work in this problem. So you have to go back and check and make sure that your solutions work. Same idea for this one, square both sides. So this becomes 2x plus 1 equals 225. Subtract 1 on both sides. 2x equals 224, divide by 2, x equals 112. You can check. 2 times 112 plus 1 is 225, and the square root of 225 is 15. So let's try these three on the bottom here. You can pause the video and come back and see if you can solve these ones without me. Alright, so you can check your answers there. Notice for the first problem, there was no solution because that solution, when you plug it in, it doesn't give you positive 5. It doesn't give you negative 5, it gives you positive 5. Alright, the last couple problems are the same idea, there's an extra step involved. So for this problem, before you can do the square on both sides, you've got to get the x squared, the square root of x by itself. So here we would divide by 5. So this is the square root of x equals 3. And then now, once you get it by itself, you can square both sides. So x equals 9. Plugging that back in, the square root of 9 is 3. 5 times 3 is 15. So you're good. For this problem, you need to add 12 to both sides. Notice the only reason I can add the 12 is because it's on the outside of the radical. So 4 equals the square root of x. and then I can square both sides. 16 equals x. Plugging in 16, 16 square rooted is 4, 4 minus 12 is negative 8, so that one's okay as well. Two steps here. Subtract 6 first. I got the negative 3 square root of x equals 45. Divide by negative 3. Square root of x equals negative 15. And then square both sides. So x equals 225. If you plug 225 back in, square root of 225 is 15, times negative 3 is negative 45. This one is no solution, because when you plug it in, it doesn't work. So make sure for all of your answers you go back in and check to make sure that they're solutions to your problems. Try the bottom three on your own, and check with me, and then you can move on to your homework for tonight.